Everything changed while I was in the hospital. This house isn't yours anymore. You don't belong here. Find somewhere else to live. I stood there frozen. My surgical wound throbbed as if it had been ripped open again. I could not believe those words were coming from my only son, the child I devoted my entire life to. I had only been hospitalized for 3 weeks due to complications from hip surgery. I thought I was coming home to love, comfort, and family. Instead, I returned to find the door closed on the home Anthony and I had built over 30 years of marriage. In that moment, I understood the betrayal. It wasn't just about the house. There was something darker happening, something I wasn't prepared to face. If you've ever wondered how far a mother can be pushed before she breaks, keep reading, and let me know in the comments which city you're reading this from. My hospital discharge papers crinkled in my coat pocket as the taxi pulled up to my beloved home. 21 days had felt like forever. Fever, infection, and pain had kept me fighting while life carried on without me. I was exhausted, but relieved to finally be home. Home. The 2-story house that Anthony and I restored with patience and love stood in the soft afternoon light. The roses I planted decades ago were still blooming along the walkway, though clearly neglected during my absence. "Need help with your bags, ma'am?" the driver asked gently, noticing my cane. "Just to the door, please," I said, my voice rough from hospital dryness. "My son should be waiting." But the door opened before we reached it. My son, Richard, stood there, not with the warm smile I had expected, but with a cold, distant expression I had never seen on his face. His voice was stiff, emotionless. Behind him, I saw movement, his wife, Veronica, and were those her parents? "Richard, what's going on?" I asked, taking a step forward. He blocked the doorway, refusing to let me pass. "You shouldn't have come today. We expected you tomorrow." The taxi driver placed my small suitcase beside me and hesitated, sensing the tension. I wished he wouldn't leave. "There's no easy way to say this," Richard continued as the taxi drove off. "Things changed while you were in the hospital. This house is no longer yours." A cold shiver ran through me, one that had nothing to do with my healing body. "What are you talking about?" "We had an agreement. Veronica's parents needed a place temporarily, and this house has space, but that didn't mean I'd be forced out." "I never signed anything." "The papers are already signed," he replied. "You'll need to find another place to live." My mind spun. Papers? Signed by whom? I hadn't authorized anything. "This is ridiculous, Richard." "Let me into my home," I said, leaning heavily on my cane and stepping forward again. This time, Veronica moved beside him. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she wore my emerald earrings, Anthony's gift for our 25th anniversary. The sight of them on her ears felt like a knife to my heart. "Isabella," she said with that sugary sweet tone I had come to distrust, "we've already packed your personal items. They're in boxes in the garage. We can send them wherever you're staying." Behind them, her parents, Raymond and Claudia Sterling, appeared. Over the years, I had seen them only a handful of times. Raymond, tall with neatly silvered hair, always carried himself with arrogance. Claudia's perpetual look of judgment had never softened, not even for a moment. And now, she stood in my home as if she owned it. "I'm sorry it came to this," Raymond said, with not a trace of real regret. But Richard made the arrangements very clear. The house was legally transferred. "Legally?" I managed to stammer. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." Richard's face hardened. "Power of attorney. Remember those papers you signed before your surgery for medical decisions? They also covered financial matters." His words hit me like a physical blow. Yes, I had signed those documents, handed to me by my own son, while terrified about my operation. I trusted him completely. I never read beyond the first page. "You tricked me," I whispered. The words felt too small compared to the size of the betrayal. "We're doing what's best for everyone," Veronica cut in. "This house is too much for you to manage alone." Richard has handled it for years. Don't come back here again, Richard said flatly. We'll send your things. It's final. I stood there, leaning on my cane, staring at the son I raised, the little boy I tucked into bed, the teen I taught to drive, the young man whose college tuition I paid by working extra shifts. Now, he was a stranger wearing my son's face. This is illegal, I said softly. And you know it. It's done, he replied coldly. Don't make this harder. Something inside me shifted, but not the way they expected. No tears. No begging. What filled me was icy clarity, an old strength I hadn't felt since my years overseeing bank compliance. Enjoy it then, I said quietly as I turned. Enjoy everything. Their confusion at my calmness almost made the heartbreak worth it. Almost. I limped toward the taxi I had wisely asked to wait. I pulled out my phone, not to call the police. Not yet. That would come later, on my terms. Instead, I sent one message to Gloria Evans, Plan B. The hotel room in downtown Phoenix was impersonal but clean, a temporary refuge while I gathered strength and focus. My hands trembled as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Gloria responded instantly, "Stay safe. I'm on my way." Gloria and I had been friends for 40 years, since college. She became a powerful attorney, and I built a career in bank compliance. After Anthony's death, she helped me organize my affairs with the kind of careful planning that came from shared professional caution. Always have a backup plan, she warned, especially with family money. I thought she was overreacting. Now her advice felt almost prophetic. A soft knock sounded at the door. Even at this late hour, Gloria looked polished in her tailored suit, her silver hair pulled into its usual neat bun. Her eyes, however, burned with fury. "Those miserable vultures," she hissed as she hugged me gently, mindful of my healing body. "Are you all right? Physically or emotionally?" I attempted a smile that never reached my eyes. "Both." She set her briefcase on the desk and pulled out files with practiced precision. "I'm standing," I said. "Which is something," I exhaled, sinking back onto the bed. "The rest. I keep thinking I'll wake up and realize this was just a fever dream." For a moment, Gloria's expression softened, before she slipped back into her calm, professional mode. "I've already started the process. The trust paperwork is airtight. Anthony was careful. That house transfer won't hold up in court." "How long?" I asked. "To reverse the fraudulent transfer?" "A few weeks, maybe months if they fight dirty." She hesitated. "But Isabella, there's more. Something I found while reviewing your accounts." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Unusual withdrawals from your investment accounts during your hospitalization. Large withdrawals." She handed me a printed statement. One glance, and my years in banking told me everything. 5 transfers totaling over $220,000. All to accounts I didn't recognize. All electronically signed under my name. While I was barely conscious in the ICU, I whispered. The betrayal hit like a blow. They didn't just take my house, they've been stealing my money. "There's something worse," Gloria added quietly. My assistant looked into the stirrings. Their real estate consulting company in Dallas, multiple complaints that mysteriously disappeared before investigations even began. And Veronica's resume? 3 mortgage companies that shut down over regulatory issues. A cold understanding spread through me. "They're involved in mortgage fraud, aren't they?" Gloria nodded. "And this has been planned for months. Your surgery just gave them the perfect opening." Pieces clicked into place, Veronica asking about my finances, Richard's sudden interest in my accounts. The betrayal hadn't started last week. It was a long game. "Richard," his name caught in my throat. "Do you think he knows?" Gloria didn't answer. Her silence spoke volumes. "I raised him better," I murmured. "His father raised him better." "People change, Isabella," she said gently. especially when money's involved. The question is, what do you want to do now? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 67 years of building a life, a home, a family. When I opened them, something inside me had hardened. Everything, I said. I want to do everything it takes to reclaim what's mine, and make them face the consequences. All of them. Even Richard. Gloria's brow lifted. No mother's protection clause? He made his choice, I said quietly. It hurt to admit, but it was true. If he's part of something illegal, he deserves the fallout. She nodded, satisfied. Then we'll be smart. Strategic. I can reach out to my contacts in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I have contacts too, I replied, thinking of old colleagues. But not yet. Let them believe I'm broken. A helpless old woman who's given up. That gives us an advantage. What's your plan? I reached into my purse and pulled out a small black notebook, my old banking lifeline. First, we document everything. Every withdrawal, every forged signature, every lie. Then we follow the money. Fraud always leaves a trail. Gloria smiled, that sharp, predatory smile I remembered from our college days. And then, she asked. And then, I replied, feeling a cold resolve settle into my bones, we spring the trap when they least expect it. We began mapping out the plan when my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Mom, we need the passwords to your investment accounts to transfer the remaining funds for your care. Send them ASAP. I handed the phone to Gloria. She skimmed it, her lip curling in disgust. What do I even say? I asked. Nothing, she said firmly. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them worry. I nodded and set the phone aside. The old Isabella would have replied instantly, desperate to keep the peace, to avoid conflict at any cost. But that Isabella was left behind on the porch of the home they stole from me. This Isabella was playing the long game. 3 days had passed since my humiliating eviction. Gloria and I had moved to a modest extended-stay suite, paying cash for everything so we left no digital trail. My body was slowly recovering, but my heart was still bruised. That's when Gloria slid her laptop toward me. You need to see this. Property records from my neighborhood filled the screen. Gloria pointed to a line. My eyes widened. The Miller family? 2 houses down? They sold 3 months ago, to Sterling Investment Properties, LLC? That's not all, Gloria said, flipping through more documents. The Hendersons across the street sold to the same buyer last month. And the elderly couple on the corner? Under contract with the very same company. They're buying up the entire neighborhood, I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. But why? Gloria opened another document, a zoning request filed just 2 weeks earlier, while I was still in the hospital. They're trying to rezone the block from residential to mixed-use commercial. The realization hit hard. My street sat right at the edge of Phoenix's booming downtown redevelopment zone. If the zoning changed, property values would explode. They're using my house as their headquarters while they buy up the other homes, I murmured. Once they control enough of the block, they'll force the change. Property values will triple. More, Gloria corrected softly. Based on market projections, they stand to make $15 to $20 million. My banking mind understood the math instantly. But one question lingered. They'd need major capital up front. Where did they get it? Gloria's expression darkened. There's more, Gloria added softly. She opened an email chain. My contacts at the SEC shared this. The Sterlings have been on their radar for a while. The emails were between Veronica and her father, dated almost 8 months ago. They discussed their plans in thinly veiled language, highlighting properties in my neighborhood and evaluating which owners could be prey to their schemes. Most disturbing was the mention of my house as their operations center once they gained control. One particular phrase made my blood run cold: mother, unlikely to fully recover from scheduled surgery. Accelerated timeline. Scheduled surgery? I whispered. My hip replacement wasn't an emergency. It had been planned months in advance. Isabella, Gloria's voice warned softly, preparing me for the truth. They were waiting for this. They knew I would be vulnerable after surgery. I understood then the horrible truth, they had counted on it. We don't know if Richard understood the full extent, Gloria began. Enough, I cut in, raising my hand. I refused to accept more excuses for my son. He knew enough. He knew they wanted my house, my money. He knew they were planning while I was incapacitated. The certainty of that betrayal cut sharper than any surgical blade. My own son had not only turned against me, but had done so with calculated coldness. I stood, ignoring my protesting hip, and walked to the window. The Phoenix skyline gleamed under the sunset, indifferent to the human tragedy unfolding below. What do you want to do? Gloria asked softly. I want justice, I said simply. Not just for me, but for everyone they had cheated, or planned to. And I want my house back. Gloria nodded, serious but firm. Then we have to move carefully. They think they've won. That gives us the element of surprise. Good, I replied. A plan was already forming in my mind, I was about to give them the shock of their lives. Reviewing property records with Gloria revealed a disturbing pattern. The Stirrings had been systematically buying homes across my neighborhood, preparing an ambitious rezoning plan worth millions. The betrayal stung even more when I saw evidence that Richard wasn't merely opportunistic. He had known about their plans for months. He might even have timed the takeover to coincide with my surgery. With my community and longtime neighbors at risk from their predatory scheme, my resolve hardened. This was no longer just about recovering my house. It was about stopping a sophisticated fraud before more vulnerable people fell victim. And I was the person who could do it. Are you sure about this, Isabella? Gloria asked, concerned, as I applied makeup in the hotel bathroom mirror. Your hip is still healing. I spent 21 days in that hospital bed feeling helpless, I replied, steadying my hand with lipstick. I'm done with helplessness. A week had passed since my eviction. In that time, Gloria and I had painstakingly reconstructed the Stirlings' operation. Their Dallas business had left a trail of financial victims, mostly seniors, who had lost everything through predatory contracts and forged documents. Now, they were replicating the same scheme in Phoenix, using my house as their base. Timing had to be perfect. I gave myself a final look in the mirror. My gray pantsuit and discreet jewelry projected exactly the image I wanted, not a defeated old woman, but a seasoned banking professional. The agents are ready, Gloria confirmed. They'll only act when we give the signal. After uncovering the scale of the scam, we had brought our evidence to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Agents had been building a case against the Stirlings for months but lacked internal access. We struck a deal, postpone immediate arrests so we could gather solid evidence, and I would have priority in recovering my assets. Remember, I recited our strategy, we need documented proof of them using my identity and finances. Bank access, forged signatures, explicit recognition of the plan. Without that, they could claim I surrendered everything voluntarily. Gloria checked her watch. Veronica's weekly salon appointment starts in 30 minutes. She'll be out for at least 2 hours. Raymond and Claudia are at a real estate viewing across town. Richard won't return from work until 5. Perfect. My son's once endearing routine had become my strategic advantage. I took a deep breath. Let's go. The taxi dropped me 2 blocks from my house. I walked slowly, using my cane more as a facade than for support. The neighborhood appeared unchanged, well-tended gardens, old homes, the grand oak where Richard had built his treehouse, but to me, everything felt tainted by the knowledge of what was happening behind the scenes. I avoided the front door, circling to the side entrance leading to the kitchen, the one I had neglected to lock in my hospital hurry. It had been our secret for years. Richard had used it as a teen to sneak in after curfew, thinking I didn't know. The key turned easily. Inside, unfamiliar voices drifted from the study. I followed the sound, stopping at the half-open door. "The closing with the Miller family is scheduled for Friday," a masculine voice said. I recognized it as Raymond Sterling's. "Once that's done, we control 40% of the block." "And the Henderson property?" another voice asked. "Resolved. We used Mrs. Hayes's banking credentials to secure the financing." Clean as a whistle. My hand gripped the cane tightly. They were using my name and my banking reputation to orchestrate their fraud. Exactly what we needed to prove. I activated the recorder on my phone before pushing the door open. The scene froze like a painting, Raymond Sterling seated behind Anani's antique desk, his partner by the window, all staring at me in naked astonishment. "Hello, Raymond," I said calmly. "Isabella." He reacted instantly, rising to his feet. "This is unexpected. How did you get in?" "Through the door," I replied, steady and direct. "The same door to the house that still legally belongs to me." His partner, a nervous man in his 30s, shifted uneasily. "Should I come back later, Mr. Sterling?" "No need," I answered before Raymond could speak. "I only came to retrieve some personal documents." Raymond's expression hardened. "This property is no longer yours. Richard made that very clear." "Yes, he did," I said, walking toward the filing cabinet in the corner. "Very clear about his intentions. Just as clear as you are in using my banking credentials to finance your operations." The color drained from Raymond's face. "I don't know what you think you heard." "Oh, I know exactly what I heard." I opened the cabinet drawer and pulled out a folder. "The Henderson property, funded using my identity. My data. My reputation. You were discussing it seconds ago." The partner in the room began inching toward the exit. "Mr. Sterling, I should go." "Isabella is confused," Raymond said sharply. "Her recent hospitalization affected her mental state, didn't it, Isabella?" I closed the drawer and faced him, smiling coldly. "My mind is perfectly clear. Clear enough to know what you, Claudia, and Veronica are plotting. Clear enough to question whether my son understands the legal consequences of the fraud he's helping you commit." The mask of polite concern fell from Raymond's face, revealing the predator beneath. "You have no proof of anything. And even if you did, no one would believe you over your own son. Now get out before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." I nodded, as if considering his point. "You're right about one thing, Raymond, proof is essential." I raised my phone, screen lit, the recording app clearly visible. "That's why I made sure to get it." His eyes flashed with fury. "Give me that phone." "I don't think so." I backed toward the door, heartbeat racing, though my voice remained composed. "I have what I came for. Enjoy the house while you still can." As I turned, Raymond lunged. His grip clamped around my arm, painfully strong. "You're not leaving with that recording." The sudden force sent a sharp bolt of pain through my healing hip. I struggled to stay upright. "Let go of me," I said, louder this time, on purpose. "Give me the phone first," he growled, reaching for it with his free hand. Before I could react, the front door burst open. "FBI. Hands where we can see them." Agents Rips and Callahan rushed in, weapons drawn. Raymond froze. Slowly, he released my arm and raised his hands. Our contingency plan, triggered by the silent emergency alert on my phone, had worked flawlessly. "Mrs. Hayes." Agent Rips approached as Callahan handcuffed Raymond. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I exhaled, steadying myself against the doorframe. "And I have something you'll want to hear." Taking a calculated risk, I had entered my house using the forgotten side door, intending only to collect evidence, not to trigger the arrest so soon. But Raymond's aggression forced the FBI to intervene earlier than planned. The recording I captured, paired with his verbal admission of using my banking credentials for fraud, was exactly the proof we needed. As Raymond was let out in handcuffs, I knew this was only the beginning. The next storm would break when my son discovered what had happened, and that his mother had been the one to bring the Sterlings down. The FBI field office felt cold and impersonal, beige walls, functional furniture, and the faint smell of stale coffee and paper. I sat in the interview room, my hip throbbing despite the painkiller Agent Rips insisted I take. "Mrs. Hayes," Agent Callahan said, closing his notebook, "your recording is incredibly valuable. Combined with the financial documents you and Ms. Evans provided, we now have enough to secure search warrants for all Sterling properties and records." "And my house?" I asked. "My accounts?" "A judge already issued an emergency freeze on any transactions involving your property," he assured me. "No one can sell or transfer it until legal ownership is settled." Relief loosened the tight knot in my chest. Small progress, but progress. "The Sterlings are in custody," Agent Rips added, "but Richard and Mrs. Sterling are still unaware." "That won't last long. We'll execute warrants at their residence tonight. Veronica will be taken in for questioning." He hesitated, his tone softening. "As for your son, we need to determine the extent of his involvement." The door opened. Gloria entered, serious yet triumphant. She carried a stack of documents. "The first court orders just came through," she said. "And they're simultaneously executing warrants on the Sterling offices in Dallas." "Mrs. Hayes," Callahan said gently, "we understand this is difficult. If you'd rather not be present when we execute the warrant at your home." "I'll be there," I cut in, steady and sure. "It's my house. I'm seeing this through." 3 hours later, I sat in an unmarked FBI vehicle across from my home. Dusk settled over the yard where Richard used to chase fireflies as a boy. Veronica's car sat in the driveway. She was back from her salon appointment, blissfully unaware that her father was already being processed at a federal detention center. In position, Rips murmured from the driver's seat, listening to her earpiece. Mrs. Sterling Hayes confirmed inside with her daughter. "They got home earlier than expected." My stomach tightened. Richard wasn't supposed to be there yet. I had tried, truly, to spare him the humiliation of what was about to unfold. I had arranged for him to be approached privately at his office. Now, he would face the full force of this raid beside his wife. "Are you sure you want to witness this?" Gloria asked softly, resting a hand over mine. Before I could respond, a convoy turned the corner, 3 unmarked sedans and a tactical van. They stopped in front of my house, agents stepping out in synchronized formation, a few wearing bold FBI lettering across their jackets. "Federal agents. We have a warrant." The announcement echoed through the quiet street. The door opened moments later. From my angle, I saw Veronica in the doorway, her face shifting rapidly from confusion to shock. Richard appeared behind her, instinctively placing a hand at her back. "It's time," Rips said, opening her door. "Please stay behind us." Neighbors emerged, lingering at porches and windows, drawn by the spectacle. I felt their eyes, curious, judgmental, concerned. Veronica spotted me behind the agents. Her polished composure cracked. "You," she hissed, voice shrill. "You did this." Richard's gaze found mine. I watched the moment he realized I was not there as a victim, but aligned with the FBI. His voice wavered. "Mom, what's going on?" "Your mother has supplied evidence of a large-scale financial fraud committed by the Sterling family," Agent Callahan stated. "We have a warrant to search the premises and seize all relevant documents and devices." "Fraud?" Richard blinked, truly stunned. "This is ridiculous." "It is," I replied, stepping forward, cane tapping firmly against the pavement. "Raymond made it very clear this morning that my banking credentials were used to obtain fraudulent financing, in my study, in my own home." Veronica's face strained. "You were here? How? How did you get in?" "The side door," I said calmly. "There are things about this home you never bothered to learn, like the fact that it legally belongs to a trust my late husband established, which requires all trustees' signatures for transfer. Including Gloria's. And she never signed anything." Richard looked between us, panic rising. Mom, this is a mistake. We were trying to help you, by taking my home, draining my accounts, dragging your family into a property scheme, and exploiting my financial reputation? My voice stayed even, though my heart trembled. That's not helping, Richard. That is fraud. That is theft. Mrs. Sterling Hayes, you need to come with us for questioning, Rip said, gesturing toward a waiting vehicle. Veronica's shock sharpened into icy control. I want my lawyer. I'm not saying one word without representation. That's your right, Callahan replied, then turned to Richard. Mr. Thompson, we'll need to speak with you as well. I don't understand, Richard whispered, hollow. Mom, what have you done? The question stunned me, not because it hurt, but because it revealed how blind he'd become. What have I done? I repeated quietly. I protected myself, and others, from people who believe they can take whatever they want without consequences. I raised you better. Your father raised you better. As agents guided Veronica toward the vehicle, she twisted back with venom. You think you've won? Just wait until my father's legal team gets involved. Your father is already in custody, I said evenly. And your mother, too. The FBI is searching your offices in Dallas as we speak. It's over, Veronica. Her face contorted with rage as the car door shut. Richard remained frozen on the porch as agents entered the house to collect evidence. Mom, he said quietly as I turned to leave with Gloria. I didn't know everything. You have to believe me. I paused, studying the face of the son I had raised, searching for a glimmer of truth in his eyes. Perhaps you didn't know everything, I said quietly. But you knew enough, Richard, and still you chose them over me. His voice cracked behind me. Where am I supposed to go now? I didn't turn. That question echoed the one I had faced when he had thrown me out of my own home. Unlike him, I felt no satisfaction in his anguish, only a deep, aching sadness for what we had lost. Some betrayals leave wounds too deep for easy forgiveness. From across the street, I watched as FBI agents scoured my house, arrested Veronica, and questioned Richard. The confusion in his eyes slowly morphed into denial, claiming ignorance of the scheme. Veronica's mask of composure shattered completely, revealing the calculating criminal she had always been. And yet, despite my heartbreak, there was a grim poetry in Richard's plea. He was now facing the consequences of choices that mirrored what he had once inflicted on me. Some lessons come at a terrible cost. As I walked away from the house I would soon reclaim, I knew this confrontation was only the first step toward justice, and, perhaps one day, healing. You should eat something, Isabella, Gloria said, pushing a container of soup across the makeshift hotel desk office. 3 days had passed since the FBI operation, days packed with statements, evidence review, and court appearances, leaving almost no space to process everything. I'm not hungry, I replied, flipping through the latest stack of documents Gloria had brought. You haven't eaten in days, she insisted. Your body is still recovering. You need strength. Reluctantly, I took a spoonful of chicken soup. Better. Gloria nodded in satisfaction. Now, we should discuss tomorrow's meeting. I knew what she meant. It would be my first face-to-face with Richard since the raid. He had requested it through his lawyer, Marcus Reed, a young public defender who had contacted Gloria the day before. He says he didn't understand the full extent of the Sterling operation, Gloria explained, her voice neutral. Claims Veronica kept him in the dark, and that the power of attorney you were tricked into signing allowed him to transfer funds. Bitterness rose in me. He had been in the dark about those two as well. I'm not defending him, Isabella, Gloria said softly. Just relaying what his lawyer said. I set the spoon down, uninterested in eating. What else? I asked. He wants to cooperate fully with the investigation. He's offering detailed testimony about Veronica and her parents, hoping it will mitigate his own situation. The thought shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. Richard had always been fiercely loyal. Survival instinct, Gloria added. The evidence against the Sterlings is overwhelming. He's making the most convenient legal choice. And what does he want from me? I asked, though I already suspected. Officially? Nothing. The meeting is supposedly just for him to give his version of events. Unofficially, he hopes you'll speak to the prosecutors on his behalf. A mother's plea can carry a lot of weight. I closed my eyes, exhausted. The thought of facing him, of hearing his justifications and excuses, squeezed my chest. You don't have to meet him, Gloria reminded me gently. You owe him nothing. I know, I said. But I need answers. I need to understand how my son became capable of doing this. The federal interview room was cold and stark, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and a large mirror concealing an observation room. Gloria sat beside me, her presence grounding me, as I clasped my hands tightly to hide their tremor. When the door opened, I barely recognized him. Richard, once self-assured and meticulously groomed, looked disheveled. Wrinkled khakis, a simple shirt, and unshaven stubble gave him a vulnerable, human look I hadn't seen in years. Mom, he said quietly as he took a seat across from me. His lawyer, glasses perched on his nose, sat beside him, serious and still. Richard, I said, keeping my voice steady. A tense silence fell. Neither of us knew where to start. Mrs. Hayes, Marcus Reed finally said, my client requested this meeting to clarify certain aspects of the situation he believes have been misunderstood. I'm listening, I replied, eyes locked on Richard, not his lawyer. Richard cleared his throat. First, I want you to know I never wanted this to go so far. When Veronica and I discussed her parents moving to Phoenix, it was supposed to be temporary, just until they found their own place. And the power of attorney, I interrupted, voice tight. The one you tricked me into signing before my surgery. He lowered his gaze in shame. That was Veronica's idea, Richard said, his voice low. She said it was just a precaution in case decisions needed to be made while you recovered. Yet you used it to transfer my house and empty my accounts, I accused, my voice trembling with controlled fury. He hesitated, glancing at his lawyer, who barely nodded. That was all Veronica and Raymond. They said they were moving some funds to safer investments for your retirement. I didn't know they were actually stealing. I studied his face, searching for the truth. Desperation was there, yes, but was it remorse, or simply regret at being caught? And the house? I pressed. You yourself told me I couldn't come back. You stood at the door of the home your father and I built and told me it was no longer mine. His eyes fixed on the table. Veronica convinced me it was for the best. She said the house was too much for you, that you'd be happier in a senior living community. I felt my composure cracking. That's not helping, Richard. That's cruelty. I know, he murmured. Now I know. What did they have over you? I demanded, the question that had tormented me for days spilling out. Veronica and her parents, what power did they have that you'd betray your own mother? Richard lifted his head, startled. His lawyer shifted uneasily. Mrs. Hayes, Marcus Reed interjected, we should focus. No, Richard interrupted, cutting him off. She deserves to know. He drew a deep breath. 3 years ago, I made some bad investments. I lost a lot of money, our savings, part of our retirement fund. I was desperate to get it back before Veronica found out. Raymond offered to help. He lent you money? I guessed, already knowing the answer. Yes, Richard admitted, looking dejected. Then it became more complicated. I signed papers. I got involved in their businesses without really understanding them. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already caught up in several of their frauds. They had leverage over you, Gloria observed quietly. Richard's tone sharpened bitterly. They had me in their hands. Veronica made it clear, if I didn't cooperate, her father would make sure I took all the blame. I tried to reconcile this new reality with the son I thought I knew. And my house, my accounts? I asked. Richard shrugged, shame clear on his face. It was a test of loyalty, to show I was committed to the operation. Veronica said once the neighborhood land was rezoned, we'd make enough money so I could comfortably place you elsewhere. Did you actually believe that? I asked, incredulous. I wanted to believe it, he said softly. It was easier than accepting what I was really doing. For the first time since this nightmare began, I glimpsed the son I remembered, the boy who, when caught lying, would eventually admit the truth, no matter how painful. Richard, I said carefully, what exactly are you asking of me today? For the first time, he held my gaze. Nothing, Mom. I don't deserve your help or forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I was weak and scared. I made terrible decisions. Whatever happens now, I'll accept it. The simplicity and dignity of his answer, so different from the desperate excuses I had imagined, disarmed me. Before I could respond, a knock on the door interrupted us. Agent Rips entered, nodding apologetically. Sorry to interrupt, but we have an urgent matter. Mrs. Hayes, could you step out for a moment? I followed, leaving the interview room behind. In the cold, aseptic halls of the federal building, the complexity of Richard's entanglement with the Sterlings had begun to settle in. He hadn't been entirely innocent, he had been manipulated, trapped by blackmail and circumstance, but his admission gave me the first glimpse of truth I had longed for. Agent Rips led me to a small conference room down the hall. Gloria followed closely, her usually steady demeanor slightly altered, putting me on immediate alert. What's happened? I asked as the door closed. We've been executing new search warrants tied to the Sterling's files, Rips explained, placing a folder on the table. A team in Dallas found something you need to see. She opened the folder and carefully arranged photographs in front of me. I leaned in, feeling a chill run through me. The images showed a private hospital room, medical equipment, and a patient lying in a bed. I don't understand, I whispered, looking up. What does this have to do with? The words died in my throat as my eyes locked on the last photograph. The patient was me, unconscious, connected to monitors in the ICU during my recent hospitalization. These were found in a hidden safe in Raymond Sterling's Dallas office, Agent Rips explained quietly. She placed another stack of documents on the table, my medical records, doctor's notes, medication orders, even my clinical charts. Documents that should have been secured at Phoenix General Hospital, protected by law. How did they get these? Gloria asked, her lawyer's instinct already calculating the legal implications. That's what concerns us, Rips said. The timestamps on these photos don't match visiting hours. And these documents reveal information no family member should have access to. A cold shiver ran through me as the meaning settled in. Someone inside the hospital was working with them, I whispered. Rips nodded. We've identified a nurse who accessed your records multiple times, during shifts when neither Richard nor Veronica visited. Phone records show repeated calls between this nurse and Raymond Sterling. But why? The question escaped me in a breath. Why monitor me so closely? Gloria's face had drained of color. Isabella, look at these medication notes. She pointed to one chart. The original pain management order had been crossed out. A higher dosage was written in different handwriting. Your recovery took longer than expected, Rips said carefully. The infection that kept you hospitalized for 21 days instead of the typical 5-7. We're investigating whether it was deliberately caused. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying they tried to? I couldn't finish the thought. We're not making accusations yet, Rips said quickly. But we are investigating the possibility that your hospitalization was intentionally prolonged to give the Sterlings more time to execute their plan. My hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Someone had tampered with my medical care, risking my life. It was almost too monstrous to process. Does Richard know about this? I managed. Not yet. We wanted to inform you first, given how personal this is. Gloria rested a steadying hand over mine. Isabella, if this was intentional, this case escalates. We're no longer discussing only fraud and elder abuse, but possibly attempted. I know, I cut in. I couldn't bear to hear the word. There's something else, Rips added, visibly uneasy. We found a life insurance policy in your name. Issued 6 months ago. The sole beneficiary is listed as Richard Thompson. The room tilted. My voice broke into a whisper. Richard knew. The last fragile thread of hope inside me snapped. He had to know. Not necessarily, Rips warned. The signature appears to be his, but we've already confirmed several forged documents in this case. We need more evidence before drawing conclusions. I closed my eyes, fighting a fresh wave of betrayal. If Richard had been aware, if he had participated in something that endangered my life, then every word of remorse he had spoken earlier was a lie. The son I thought I saw for a moment had been another illusion. I need to see him again, I said, opening my eyes with new resolve. Mrs. Hayes, with this new information, we strongly advise. I need to see his face when he hears this, I insisted. That's how I'll know. 21 years as a compliance officer, and a lifetime as a mother, had honed my ability to detect lies. I needed to look my son in the eyes when this truth detonated. Rips hesitated, then nodded. We plan to confront him with this anyway. If you insist on being present, we'll allow it. We returned to the interview room where Richard and his lawyer were speaking in urgent whispers. The lawyer stiffened. Agent Rips, my client has cooperated fully. If you are suggesting he participated in... I'm not suggesting anything yet, Rips cut in. I'm asking for an explanation of these documents. I can't explain them because I had nothing to do with it. Richard's voice cracked as panic surged. Veronica handled all the insurance matters. She said we were updating policies. I signed whatever she put in front of me. The terror in his eyes, the horror rather than guilt, told me more than his words. My son had been weak, naive, morally compromised, but I did not believe he would knowingly take part in something that endangered my life. Do you understand what this means, Richard? I asked softly. Your wife and her parents may have been planning something far worse than stealing my home. Richard covered his face, shoulders shaking. Oh God. What have I done? What have I allowed to happen? Watching him finally grasp the true extent of the Sterling family's betrayal, I felt an unexpected swell of compassion. Richard had betrayed me in ways I once believed unforgivable, but now, I saw him for what he truly was. Not the mastermind. A victim. Another pawn in the Sterling's far darker game. I need to amend my statement, Richard said suddenly, lifting his head with a new resolve. I need to tell you everything I know about Veronica and her parents. Everything, I whispered, the word trembling on my lips. A devastating realization struck me. Evidence suggested the Sterlings had deliberately complicated my medical recovery, possibly even putting my life at risk. And the life insurance policy with Richard as the beneficiary loomed like a shadow over everything. But when I looked at him, I saw genuine horror, not complicity. My son had betrayed me, yes, but he was not involved in this monstrous aspect of their plan. And now, as he faced the horrifying truth of his wife's actions, his determination to reveal everything hinted at even darker secrets yet to come. Amidst my anger, a fragile thought began to emerge. Perhaps, from this nightmare, the first seeds of redemption could grow. Not forgiveness, yet, but understanding. Agent Callahan spread a large map across the conference room table, 17 properties, all acquired through the same fraudulent schemes, funneled through shell companies linked to the Sterlings. 2 weeks had passed since the revelations about my medical records. I was in a secure FBI-provided apartment, known only to Gloria and the agents handling the case. The investigation had grown exponentially, uncovering a criminal network far wider than anyone had anticipated. And the nurse? I asked, my voice tight with the question that had haunted me. Someone had deliberately complicated my recovery. Miranda Jenkins, Rips replied, sliding a personnel file toward me. She worked in post-surgical care for 3 years. She received several payments from a Sterling shell company, over $25,000 in the past 6 months. She's admitted to manipulating your medication. I forced myself to look at the file. The truth, however painful, had to be known. She's cooperating, Callahan said cautiously. According to her statement, she was instructed to prolong your recovery by adjusting medications and introducing a mild bacterial contamination during 4 changes. My stomach churned at the clinical phrasing. Someone had deliberately harmed me. She could have killed me. She claims she calibrated the contamination to prolong hospitalization without risking your life, Rips added, her disgust barely concealed. And Veronica orchestrated all of this? I asked, though the answer was already clear. Raymond Sterling made the initial contact with Jenkins, Callahan confirmed. But all the details were designed by Veronica. Text messages recovered from her phone show precise questions about your treatment schedule, medications, and expected discharge dates. I closed my eyes, shaking with disbelief. My own daughter-in-law had deliberately prolonged my suffering to buy time for their scheme. And Richard? Gloria asked softly. Did he know? No evidence suggests he did, Rips said. His cooperation has been extensive and appears genuine. The prosecution considers his testimony crucial against the Sterlings. A small relief. My son had betrayed me, yes, but he hadn't conspired to harm me physically. That distinction mattered, though it did not erase the sting of his actions. Anything else I should see? Callahan asked, sliding another folder toward me. Inside were messages between Veronica and her parents, dating back almost 2 years. They had carefully plotted to seize my assets, isolate me from family and friends, control my finances, and ultimately relocate me to a long-term care facility, once they had everything under legal control. My hands trembled. They had targeted me long before my hip surgery, seeing my vulnerability as an opportunity. My hospitalization had only accelerated their timeline. Callahan placed another document before me, a luxury retirement community advertisement from Arizona, accompanied by an email from Veronica, perfect location for Isabella once everything is finalized. Isolated, minimal supervision, once she's there, we'll have absolute control over visits and communications. They plan to imprison me far from anyone who knew me, where I would be forgotten while they enjoyed their stolen wealth. There will be additional charges based on this evidence, Rips said. Elder abuse, conspiracy, and potentially attempted homicide, depending on how the prosecution interprets the medical manipulation. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The calculated destruction of not only my finances, but also my freedom and dignity, was almost impossible to comprehend. When can I go home? I asked, finally. The forensic team finished at your residence yesterday, Callahan said. Technically, you could return now, though we recommend waiting until security risks are fully assessed. I want to go today, I replied firmly. I need to be in my own space. Gloria squeezed my hand. I'll stay with you for the first few days. We can install additional security if needed. Rips nodded. We can arrange that. But there's one more matter, Richard has requested another meeting. He'll be transferred to a minimum security facility pending trial and wants to see you before that. My first instinct was to refuse. The wound of his betrayal was still raw, and I wasn't sure I could face him again. Yet something deeper, the mother who remembered the boy he once was, could not say no. Tomorrow morning, if that's agreeable, Rip said when I asked. After that, his visits will be very limited until legal proceedings conclude. I nodded slowly. I'll see him then. That afternoon, I stood on my porch with the key in my hand, hesitating before sliding it into the lock. The house looked the same from the outside, yet I knew strangers had invaded my sanctuary. They had plotted my downfall in the very place where I was supposed to feel safe. Take your time, Gloria murmured beside me. This is going to be hard. I drew in a steadying breath and opened the door. The familiar scent of home, polished wood, old books, and the faint lavender I tucked into dresser drawers, was smothered beneath foreign perfumes and harsh cleaning products. Subtle traces of the Sterlings were everywhere. The furniture hadn't moved much, but my favorite orchid was gone from the sunroom. New curtains hung in the living room. In my study, Anthony's antique desk had been turned to face the door, instead of the garden view he loved. That one small change hit me harder than I expected. They had erased our rhythms, our life. "We can restore everything," Gloria said gently when she saw my face. "Make it yours again." I nodded and continued through each room, noticing every violation. In the primary bedroom, my clothes had been cleared from the closet and replaced with Veronica's designer suits. My simple jewelry box was emptied. The pieces Anthony had given me through decades of marriage were gone. Earlier, Rips told me, "The FBI recovered most of your jewelry from the Sterling safe deposit box. They'll return them once they're processed as evidence." It was a small comfort. Strangers had handled those intimate pieces of my marriage, valuing only their dollar worth, not their meaning. In the kitchen, my handwritten recipe cards, some passed down from my mother and grandmother, had been thrown away, replaced by glossy cookbooks that had clearly never been used. That cut deeper than the financial theft. It felt like a deliberate erasing of my family's history. The next day, I would face my son again before his transfer to a facility to await trial. A conversation I dreaded, yet had to have, if I wanted to understand how my family had shattered so completely. The visitation room at the detention center was brighter than I expected, fluorescent lights bouncing off pale yellow walls trying, and failing, to feel welcoming. Richard sat at a small table, the standard-issue uniform hanging loosely on him. He had lost weight, his face drawn, his eyes hollow. "Thank you for coming," he said when I sat down. No lawyer this time, his choice. "You wanted to see me?" I replied calmly. "I'm here." He nodded, staring at his tightly clasped hands. "They told me about the nurse. About what Veronica and her parents planned to do to you." "Yes," I said quietly. I waited. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know." His voice cracked. "I knew they wanted your house, your money." That was already terrible, unforgivable, but I never imagined they would. His voice failed him. "I believe you," I said. His head snapped up, surprised. "You believe me about that?" "Yes. There's enough evidence to show you weren't aware of their plans to harm me or institutionalize me. But you did know about the plan to take everything I owned. You chose to be part of that." He flinched, but didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why, Richard?" The question that haunted me for weeks finally surfaced. "You were raised with values, with love. What happened to the boy your father and I raised?" He sat in silence for a long time, gathering himself. "I've been asking myself the same question every night," he said at last. "The easy answer is I was weak. I was afraid of losing Veronica if I didn't do what she wanted. Afraid of what her father would do if he exposed some of the questionable choices I'd made before." "And the real answer?" I pushed. He met my eyes. "The real answer is, at some point, I started believing I deserved more than I earned. That cutting corners was justified if it got me what I wanted." His voice was barely a whisper. "I became someone I don't even recognize. Someone Dad would be ashamed of." The mention of Anthony, who loved his son deeply and believed he would grow into a good man, hit me like a blade through the heart. "Your father would be disappointed," I said quietly, "and so am I." "But what would disappoint?" "Most wouldn't be disappointed that you made mistakes, Richard," I said, "but that you betrayed your own principles to cover them up." He nodded, taking that truth without excuse. "The prosecutors offered a plea deal," he continued. 5 years, reduced to 3 with good behavior, in exchange for my full testimony against Veronica and her parents. "Will you take it?" I asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "It's more clemency than I deserve." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the consequences pressing down. My son would spend years in prison. The life he had known was gone. The future Anthony and I had envisioned for him had shrunk to this sterile room, harshly lit by unforgiving fluorescent lights. "I found something yesterday," I said, shifting the conversation. "At the bottom of your father's desk drawer." From my purse, I pulled a worn envelope. It's a letter he wrote to you before he died. He asked me to give it to you when I thought you needed it most. I believe that time is now. Richard's hand trembled as he took the envelope, turning it over to see his name in Anthony's unmistakable handwriting. I didn't know this existed, he whispered. During his last months, he wrote several letters, I explained. This was the last one. He opened it carefully, as if the paper might crumble in his hands. I watched silently as emotions crossed his face, pain, shame, and finally, a flicker of determination. When he finished, he folded the letter, pressed it to his chest for a moment, and returned it to the envelope. Thank you for bringing this, he said, voice steadier now. I needed to hear his voice again, even under these circumstances. He gestured vaguely at the room around us. What will you do afterward? I asked. When you've served your sentence? The question seemed to surprise him. Perhaps he hadn't allowed himself to imagine a future beyond punishment. I don't know, he admitted. My career, my finances, they're gone. My reputation, he shrugged, the gesture heavy with the weight of his ruined life. You'll have to rebuild yourself, I told him. Not just practically, but morally. That's the hardest work. I know, he said quietly, then asked the question that weighed most heavily on him. Will you ever forgive me, Mom? I considered my words carefully. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Richard. It's a process. Right now, I'm still processing the pain, the betrayal, the impact of discovering who you became. I don't know if complete forgiveness is possible, but I do know this, you are still my son. That fact doesn't change. How our relationship moves forward depends on the choices you make from this moment on. He nodded, accepting the partial answer with calm I hadn't expected. It's fair. More than fair. Time was almost up. A guard appeared, ready to escort him back to his cell. As we stood, he asked one last thing. The house, will you stay there, after everything? Yes, I replied firmly. It's my home. I won't let what they did drive me away from the life your father and I built. Good, he murmured softly. Dad would have wanted that. Watching him leave, shoulders held high despite everything, I felt a quiet sense of closure. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was a first step toward understanding. My son had made terrible choices. He had betrayed me in ways that might never fully heal. Yet beneath the man who participated in the Sterling scheme, fragments of the boy I raised remained. Outside, Gloria waited silently in the car, a steady presence I had come to rely on. How did it go? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. As well as could be expected, I said, watching autumn leaves swirl across the parking lot. He accepted a plea deal, 5 years, maybe reduced to 3. And how do you feel about that? I paused, reflecting fully. Sad, relieved, still angry, but less than before. Most things are clear to me now, I said. I know what happened, and I know where we're going. Gloria nodded, understanding without a word. As we drove back to my home, reclaimed and in the midst of restoration, I thought of all that had passed. From the shock of betrayal to the fight for justice, from the horror of discovering their schemes to this fragile moment of resolution. The road ahead would still be complex. Legal battles against Veronica and her parents would drag on. Securing my assets and rebuilding my life would take time. Reconstructing a relationship with my son, if possible, would demand patience and effort. But for the first time since surgery, since my world had shattered, I felt something I hadn't in months, genuine hope. Not because the path would be easy, but because I had discovered a strength within myself I never knew I possessed. As we turned onto my street, the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the house. A promise of new beginnings, even amid so many endings. Inside, Gloria placed a family portrait on the freshly installed shelf. Looks just like it should, I murmured, surveying the living room. 6 months of rebuilding, restoring, reclaiming. Finally, home. The furniture had been returned to its proper places. The curtains reflected my taste again, and every subtle trace of the Sterling's brief stay had been meticulously removed. Better than right, Gloria countered, pointing to the new security system panel by the door. It's safer now than ever. She was right. Everything I had endured had led to practical improvements: reinforced locks, a comprehensive security system, updated protocols for my financial accounts. The fragility that had allowed the Sterlings to infiltrate my life had been identified and fortified against future threats. The roses are blooming again, too, I added, looking out at my garden, where spring shoots were emerging. Hours spent replanting and tending the flower beds, neglected during the Sterling's occupation, had provided unexpected therapy, a reconnection with the earth itself. Gloria smiled knowingly. If they're coming back with proper care and time, recovery is possible. The past months had brought significant progress. Veronica and her parents faced an avalanche of federal charges: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and attempted homicide for the medical manipulation. The evidence, reinforced by Richard's detailed testimony, was overwhelming. To avoid trial, they had accepted plea deals: 20 years for Raymond, 15 for Claudia, 18 for Veronica. The scope of their criminal network was even larger than initially thought, spanning 3 states. The nurse who had altered my medication received 8 years, reduced to 5 for cooperating and testifying about other vulnerable patients the Sterlings had targeted. Investigators reopened 2 previous cases of elderly homeowners who died under suspicious circumstances after dealings with Sterling investment properties. Thankfully, my neighborhood had been spared. The properties they had acquired were being returned to rightful owners or heirs, and the community had united to create a support network for seniors to prevent future predatory schemes. "Have you decided about the visit?" Gloria asked, pulling me from my thoughts as she served iced tea. Richard's request. After 3 months in a minimum security facility, he had asked if I would see him again. His weekly letters, sent consistently since his incarceration, had respected my boundaries, showing remorse and attempts at rehabilitation without expecting forgiveness. "I think I'll go," I said, surprised at my certainty. "Not next week, I have the garden club fundraiser, but maybe the week after." Gloria nodded, expression carefully neutral. "You seem calmer about the idea than a month ago." "I dreamed of Anthony last night," I explained. "We were on the porch swing, talking just like old times. He told me something that stayed with me: healing doesn't mean erasing the wound. It means finding purpose in the scar." "That sounds like Anthony," Gloria said softly. "He always found wisdom in difficult times." I woke thinking about Richard, I continued. "Some wounds never fully close, but they can still lead to something meaningful, not returning to what was, but moving forward to something new." The doorbell interrupted our conversation. On the screen of my tablet, connected to the security camera, I saw a delivery person holding a large floral arrangement. "Expecting flowers?" Gloria asked. "No," I replied, feeling a flicker of old weariness. Distrust doesn't vanish overnight, even with new security measures. Gloria checked the delivery credentials and accepted the bouquet: lilies and irises, my favorites. The card read simply, "Thinking of you on your birthday, your neighbor, Eleanor Jameson." I smiled. Eleanor had moved in across the street 3 months ago, a retired literature professor with a sharp wit and similar tastes. We had slowly forged a friendship through gardening tips and shared reading. She had lost her husband around the same time I lost Anthony, creating an immediate bond. "What a lovely gesture," Gloria said. "You're building a solid community here." She was right. After the Sterling scandal, I had deliberately chosen connection over isolation. The neighborhood book club I had founded met monthly in my living room. The senior community center, where I volunteered twice a week, had become a place of friendship and support. The garden club welcomed me enthusiastically, even appointing me head of the annual heirloom rose exhibition. These bonds, freely chosen, had become my strongest defense. "I've been thinking about the foundation," I said, settling onto the patio swing with Gloria and our tea. "The Anthony Miller Medical Research Foundation?" she asked. "Yes. I want to expand its mission. Add a division focused on elder protection, legal support, fraud prevention, education, and victim services. Gloria's eyes lit up. Using your experience to help others. Exactly. The Sterlings had dozens of victims before me. Most didn't have my resources or knowledge. I want to change that reality. That's a wonderful idea, Gloria said warmly. Anthony would be proud. I think so too, I replied, gazing at the neighborhood where I had rebuilt a sense of home and security, finding purpose in the scar, just as Anthony had said. Afternoon slipped into evening as we sat in comfortable silence, watching neighbors return from work and children play nearby, the pulse of a community alive around us. The trauma of my ordeal would never fully vanish. There would be moments of intense alertness, echoes of betrayal. But those scars no longer defined my daily life, they had become a source of wisdom, empathy, and renewed purpose. Later, as Gloria left, I sat at Anani's desk, now in its rightful place in front of the garden window, and began outlining the structure of the foundation's new division. Everything made sense. The Sterlings had chosen me, seeing a fragile, easily exploited widow. The foundation would transform that experience into protection for countless others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a meeting with the foundation board, preparations for my visit to Richard, the restoration of the garden neglected during my absence. Yet, for the first time in months, I looked forward to these challenges not just with determination, but with genuine enthusiasm. My phone rang. It was Eleanor, checking that the flowers had arrived and inviting me to a chamber music concert next weekend. As we talked, I realized how much my life had changed in 6 months. Betrayal had broken something essential in me, my basic trust, my sense of safety, but from that rupture, new strengths had emerged, new connections, a different purpose that might never have arisen otherwise. Finding purpose in the scar, I murmured, echoing Anthony's words. Not erasing the wound, but transforming it into something meaningful, something that could, with time, become beautiful. 6 months after confronting Richard, I found myself renewed. My house restored, the garden blooming again, the Sterlings punished, the community fortified, and my connections strengthened. When Richard requested another visit, I decided I was ready, not to erase the past, but to discover meaning in it. The foundation's expansion would give concrete form to that purpose, shielding others from suffering I had endured. Although the betrayal had broken me, it also opened a space for growth, connection, and wisdom. And in the end, the wicked were unmasked, justice had prevailed, and the upright would find peace.